G'day everyone. We are working our way through one of the most famous sermons of Jesus, most commonly known as the Sermon on the Mount, or the Sermon on the Plain, as Luke has it. One of the most famous sermons, one of, if not the most hardest sermon to hear, to receive. As we've already heard this morning, last week we were rattled, some of us. And it's no different, part 2 this morning that we're up to, that we're going to focus on. Verse 27, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Are you listening? I want you to picture an enemy right now, an enemy of yours. Bring them to front of mind. How do you feel when you hear Jesus call you to love them? How do you feel? Well, it depends, doesn't it? Some of you might be struggling to think of an enemy. The closest to an enemy you can come is the person who cut in on you on the road yesterday. Maybe your unthankful teenager. Must be nice if that's you, right? That you can't think of an enemy. Although there could be a problem too. We'll come back to that. Some of you are thinking, man, which one of my 50 enemies will I think about? You know, there's Bob, there's Jez, there's Muzz, there's... Now, if that is you and you have 50 enemies, you might want to talk to someone about why you have so many. What's the common denominator there? But picture an enemy. Someone who hates you, who speaks ill of you, who mistreats you. Jesus calls you to love them. How do you feel? Well, again, if they're not much of an enemy, you go, sure, in theory, all right. But if the enemy is the boss who squashes and oppresses you every day, the colleague who is a thorn in your side, or worse, a family member who mistreats you, who makes your life miserable. Well, now the call to love them, it feels so daunting, dangerous even. Maybe it feels unfair, unjust, or it just simply feels impossible. Well, here's the thing. It's important to own how we feel about this call to love our enemies, but it's not a suggestion of Jesus. It's not something that you might want to try and work on one day. The stakes couldn't be higher. So he finishes this sermon in light of all that he has said, verse 46, with two options. That you would hear his words and put them into practice. And if you are that person, you are like the person who will build your life on a rock so that when the torrent comes and smashes it, it will stand. And he's talking about the final judgment of God. You will stand, heaven. But to hear his words and not obey them, to not put them into practice, is the person who builds their life on sand and experiences complete devastation, eternal judgment. The stakes couldn't be higher. Because our stance towards our enemies will reveal our stance towards Jesus. And our stance towards Jesus means the difference of heaven and hell. This is huge. Which is why it's important for us to know what love of enemy is, what it isn't, and how we do it. They're the steps we'll take this morning. What is it to love our enemy? What is it not? And how can we possibly do it? So firstly, what is it? Well, to state the rather obvious, it is to love the unlovely. Think about it. To love your enemy is almost a contradiction in terms, isn't it? Because we love lovely things. We love lovely, kind, generous people. We love things that are pleasing to the eye. We love weather with blue skies and warm weather. Who loves their cancer? who loves their depression, who loves their divorce, who loves their stress. What are you talking about? That sounds perverse. That's the category Jesus is operating in. To love your enemy is to love those who hate you, curse you, mistreat you. Therefore, enemy love of enemy, is love for the unlovely. It's a bizarre category shift for us, which means, secondly, it's radical and unnatural. This love of enemy is radical and unnatural. It is so different from the world's love. That's what Jesus contrasts the love that he calls for in his followers with the love of the world, verse 32 to 34. Where he's talking about the love of the world, which has the principle at its heart of mutual benefit. Mutual benefit. What good is it to love those who just love you back? Jesus says you see this everywhere all the time. You see it in the street. People happily take out your bins when you're away, because when they're away, the expectation is. You see it in the pub. You see this bloke buy 5 of his mates a drink. Wow, how generous. But you know that deep-seated Aussie value system, which means if you receive a drink and don't buy one back, whoa, you scum. Forgot my wallet. Anyone seen that one go down? It doesn't go down well. Do you remember that old TV show, those of us old enough to watch old TV shows, Random Act of Kindness? There'd be a camera that would follow people around who would just walk up to random people and do an act of kindness. And it would capture how it moved and how warm. And the theory was you pay it on, you go and do another random act of kindness for someone. But none of them walked up to the thief who'd just stolen their car. None of them walked up to the bully who had bullied them their whole life. Because sinners can do random love, but only those who follow Jesus are able to embrace radical love. He contrasts this. This is not like the love that we see around us. Love of enemy is not natural, it is not normal, it is out of this world. Which thirdly means loving our enemy, and it should be obvious, is costly. Is costly. It doesn't bring about a return like the love of sinners, like the love of the world brings about a return. Maybe it leaves us out of pocket, possibly literally, verse 34, to lend without expecting repayment. That's not a great strategy to grow your wealth. Maybe it'll leave us without as much as we otherwise would have had. Look at verse 29. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. What is this love of our enemy? Well, it is a generosity of spirit that is willing to suffer injustice for the undeserving. For the undeserving. There's that 19th century French novel, Les Miserables. Excuse the French. Many of us, of course, are only aware of it because they made a movie of it where we had the gladiator and what is it, X-Men up against each other singing their whole way through this old film. But it has a really powerful moment in it. The main character, Valjean, he's in chains as a prisoner. He's been locked up for 19 years and he's released. But he's released into a life of poverty and so very quickly a life of crime. One night he is taken in by a bishop of the local church who brings him in, gives him food, gives him shelter, is kind and generous to him. In the middle of the night, Valjean gets up, steals the silverware, runs off to continue his life of crime. He's caught by the police who drag him back to the bishop, and they say to the bishop, "Here you go, we have your silver. We caught this man red-handed, and he had the nerve to say that you gave it to him." And the bishop replies in a way that changes Valjean's life forever. "That's right," said the bishop. "But my friend, you left so early. Surely something slipped your mind. You forgot I gave you these also. Would you leave the best behind?" And he hands him the candlesticks as well. He says to the police, "Messieurs, release him. This man has spoken true." There is a picture of what Jesus calls his followers to. I love that he's different to what the world knows. It doesn't scratch our back. I love that he's radical and out of this world and therefore costly and willing to bear up under that cost. Jesus says, "You want to know who my disciples are? Then you will see in their lives love for the unlovable. Radical, doesn't make sense love, costly love. There's my disciple. There's the one who gets me, who knows me, who follows me, who is building their life on the rock." There is something of what loving our enemy is: radical, costly, out of this world. It's important, secondly, though, to clarify what it isn't, what Jesus doesn't mean. Now, there's twin dangers that I feel about presenting this teaching. There's two ways that we can fall and get it wrong. On the one side, the danger is that we misunderstand and misapply this radical love in a way that confuses categories, or worse, crushes people in a way Jesus would actually be furious to think was done in the name of his teaching. There are qualifications that need to be made. That's the danger on one side. But the danger on the other side is that this radical teaching of Jesus dies a death of 1,000 qualifications. It doesn't mean this, could mean this, and in this exception, and we water it down to nothing different to the love of those around us. Now, despite the risk, there are some important qualifications to make that actually then help us understand what this love is better. So first thing to bear in mind is hyperbole. We thought about this last week. Jesus was a first century Jewish rabbi who used one of the most common tools available to the teacher of his day and his culture, which is hyperbole. Dramatic, exaggerated language that would capture you, that would cut through. But hyperbole cautions against a strong, literal reading. Andrew helpfully spent time on this last week about not taking the blessing of poverty and the woes of riches literally. And yet, it does something that has a strong, literal edge to it. You can't dismiss it entirely as well. Well, I think that the command here to love our enemies is literal. Literal. To do good to those who hate you, to bless those who curse you, to pray for those who mistreat you, literal. An outworking of what it is to love our enemies. But the four illustrations in verse 29 and 30, to turn the cheek, to give your coat, to give without question, to not ask for anything back, these are illustrations that are exactly that. Not necessarily literally to be applied in every single situation. He starts to illustrate, to put some flesh on what it might look like. Now, I'm going to come back to some of these. But here's the first thing. We must take care to not misunderstand Jesus with a simple literalism throughout his teaching, as we saw last week. Remember that he uses exaggerated language for a point, for a purpose, not to be watered down. But we bear that in mind. Secondly, we bear in mind who is the enemy most in view in context. Who is the enemy most in view? Well, if you remember last week, and we've read straight on, we should see verse 22. Jesus said, "Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you, when they insult you, reject your name as evil because of me." That's almost exactly the definition of the enemy he goes on to call us to love. And so the enemy most in view, as Jesus first gave it, is the one who makes your life hard because they despise Jesus. And if they hated Jesus, they will hate his followers. Now, this doesn't mean we can wiggle out of the call to love those who hate us for other reasons. Not at all. Not saying that. Because, of course, in chapter 10, Jesus will give the parable of the Good Samaritan as someone tries to wriggle out of, well, who is my neighbour that I need to love? Can I make it as narrow as possible? Jesus goes, no. So we don't try and wriggle out of this, but we do bear in mind that in the context of this sermon, the enemy that's most clearly in view, that Jesus is preparing his first followers for, is the one who would persecute them on account of their faith in Jesus. And so if you can't think of a single enemy, there could be a problem. Especially in a culture, yes, Western, Christianised, but increasingly hostile to Christianity. So many of you know this just in your workplace, don't you? You know this in certain aspects of schooling. And so if there's not a single person who hasn't hated you, despised you, treated you poorly because of your stand, because of your speech for Jesus, is it possible that you've put him in the closet? That you're actually not stepping out and standing for Jesus? We ought to expect to have enemies. That's what Jesus primarily is preparing us for. Enemies that we're to love, to do good, to pray for. Third thing to bear in mind is to remember who the original people that he spoke this to are. Have a look, verse 20. Looking at his disciples, he said, love your enemies. He's not looking at a group of lawyers representing the state who are writing up legislation to govern a society. He's not saying no thief should be able to just keep on stealing. He's not looking at a group of school principals, especially a principal of a Christian school, and saying your school must never suspend or discipline or expel a kid caught stealing from another student. Now, if a student were to steal from the principal by breaking into their car, parked into their home, well, that follower of Jesus has a different choice to make than they do as they lead an organisation, a community of people. This is a personal ethic that Jesus gives each one of his followers, not a communal, corporate ethic. The fourth thing to bear in mind that we must take care with is that this is not cover for domestic abuse. Sadly, our enemies can often be those who are closest to us, who are in our family, and for some of us, maybe it's our spouse. And the ESV translation, maybe you've got that, it reads, "Pray for those who abuse you. To the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also." That is an accurate translation of the original, but it can be triggering for us, understandably. And I know that this has been an issue in a number of our groups through the week, which in one sense I'm glad to hear because we're wrestling with the confronting teaching of Jesus. Pray for those who abuse you. Turn the other cheek to the one who strikes you. Is Jesus teaching that to be his follower means staying in an abusive relationship? No. For a number of reasons. Firstly, the cheek. Turn the other cheek to the one who would strike you. This was a first century Jewish idiom, a little phrase, a little way of speaking that everyone in that day knew and understood that we don't necessarily share. It's a first century idiom for bear an insult. Bear an insult. A public slap with the back of the hand was something used in that culture, still used in other cultures today, to signal an insult and a rejection. I object and I reject you in this moment, or maybe permanently. It was a way that people would be put out of the Jewish synagogue they would be slapped with the back of the hand on the cheek as a signal of, you have no part, no fellowship with us. It was not an act of violent beating. Jesus' point in calling us to turn the other cheek is to not seek revenge or retaliation. To be willing to bear further insult and rejection to your reputation. Have a look at verse 22 again. It's pretty much described there. Blessed are you when people hate you, exclude you, insult you, reject your name as evil because of me. Be willing to continue to bear up to that shame of belonging to me. In context. There is a qualification even here, though, which we'll come to. But let's be clear, Jesus is not literally saying keep offering your body as a punching bag to your abuser or any other form of domestic abuse. Tragically, this very verse has been used and abused by perpetrators and misunderstood and misapplied by victims. So both together, they take this to mean I just must continue to bear up under the abuse of my Bible-reading spouse. That is not what Jesus is teaching. He is not literally saying be a passive doormat in every situation. How do we know? How can I say that? Well, Jesus didn't practice this literally. In John's Gospel, he records for us the final night where Jesus is arrested, as Luke will, but John brings some other details. And Jesus is brought before the high priest, the Jewish high priest. One of the high priest's assistants, do you remember, slaps Jesus in the face, literally hits him. And what does Jesus do? He doesn't turn the other cheek. Not literally, anyway. He says, if I said something wrong, then prove it. But if you can't, then why did you strike me? He is not passively just being a doormat, literalistically turning the other cheek to keep being struck. He stands up for the truth, though he doesn't seek revenge, so he does practice what he preaches. He doesn't retaliate. He doesn't seek revenge. And as they kill him, as they crucify him, he cries out, Father, forgive them. He really does practice what he preached. But beware of a literal understanding of enduring violence at the hands of a spouse. The second thing to bear in mind is loving your enemy doesn't mean you shouldn't appeal to the authorities for relief and justice. In the same passage that the Apostle Paul, one of the great examples of what it looks like to follow Jesus, in the same passage that he boasts of his suffering for following Christ, he also speaks of running away from persecution of the governor of Damascus. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, if you want to chase that up. Later on, when he was illegally imprisoned in Philippi, he was illegally beaten up whilst in prison. He didn't just turn the other cheek, stay quiet, keep copying it, move on. No. He actually insists that they come and right this wrong. You have wronged. I'm not going to just leave this when they realise what they've done. He's a Roman citizen. I'm not just going to sneak off quietly. No. You come and acknowledge the wrong. We see the Apostle Paul appealing to the authorities. Now, Jesus and Paul take steps to avoid unnecessary suffering when it's possible. And they also provide the model of how to endure unavoidable suffering, which is to entrust yourself to God who judges justly, who sees all, nothing will escape him. Domestic abuse is a horrific sin. And thankfully, it's also a crime in our land. And so going to the authorities that God has put in place for the good of society, to go to them for order and justice is not at odds with loving your enemy and turning the other cheek. And remember, this is a personal ethic, not a corporate one. And so where there are kids involved, you are now needing to make decisions not just for yourself, but for the good of others. The victim is not just thinking of herself at this point. And I say herself because 3/4 of victims are women, though it can be reversed in rare cases. Sadly, the reality of domestic violence is probably being experienced by some in this room today. We are not ignorant to the reality of that fact. And as I said, both victims and perpetrators have twisted Jesus' teaching on love to distort, to mean that she must remain in the home, keep silent, to bear the other cheek. Don't you dare speak up. Don't you dare go to the authorities or tell anyone. Now, we speak of church being a hospital for sinners, don't we? Because it is. All of us, a hospital for sinners. But it is not to be a haven for sinners who would twist and turn the Bible's teaching to bring the most horrific abuse on those that we are to die for, that we are to lay down our lives for. Men, if this is you, stop. Repent. Turn to the Saviour who will forgive you. But stop. And don't you dare twist the teaching of Jesus to abuse the bride that you are to bleed and die for. And all Christian men, we must be different. We must be different. If we are to love our enemies in a way that is radically different, how much more our precious bride? We must be different. We must stand for a culture that is different. We have a home very nearby our house where there is obvious evidence of regular domestic abuse, and I'm trying to do what I can. But as I've spoken to other neighbours, they go, "Not my problem. We just stay out of it." Men and women, followers of Jesus, we must be different. We must be concerned for those that the world is not concerned for. Now, if you are here and experiencing abuse, we know just how hard it can be to reach out. But know that as a church, we will take you seriously, and you are welcome to approach any leader that you like who will take you seriously and do our best to support you. But can I point you particularly to Tanya? If you were to go to our website and search up Tanya, you'll find her phone number there to get in contact with her. She is ready to hear from you. You'll also find, by the way, on our website, our policy on domestic abuse, how as a church we think about it and seek to pastor people, all parties through it. Loving your abusive spouse doesn't mean remaining under their abuse, but it does mean to do good to them as you are able. It does mean not to curse them to the kids or to anyone else, but to bless them, to speak well of them. And it does mean to pray for them. That you are called to do. That is a literal call of Jesus. And so how could anyone possibly do that? To love someone who has wronged us so much. What is any of our hope to practice this preaching that Jesus calls for? Well, here's the third step. The answer is in verse 35 and 36. Jesus says, love your enemies. Do good to them and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. There are two things here that empower this seemingly impossible call to love our enemies. Two resources that we have that are beyond anything natural in us. Firstly, relationship. Relationships change our values, don't they? Which in turn then change our behaviours. Have you noticed how the young man who becomes captivated by a lovely young woman, he now values showering, he values going to the barber and looking sharp, he values hygiene and presentation in a way that he hadn't cared about, because the relationship has changed his values. Have you noticed how the young woman who is falling in love with a young man starts caring about rugby league? Although not quite. I've had 25 years of trying to win Brie to it. She still couldn't care less. Though we've got a little bit further with cricket, the most glorious sport. Relationships change our values. The people that we are in relationship with, the people that we are walking with, it changes what we care about. It therefore changes our behaviour. The power to love your enemy, to do the seemingly impossible, comes from relationship with God the Most High as your Father, as your heavenly Father. This is the key. The key is to appreciate just how much it cost for God to make you his child. Many of us have heard this so many times, and we need to just take care to slow down, please, and listen carefully to every single word that I say. You've heard it a million times. Listen carefully. You are able to call God your Father not because you are lovable. You and I, by nature and choice, are enemies to God. We've hated him. We've cursed him. We've abused him. We've slapped him on the cheek. We've taken from him with no regard. Though he is the one who has given us everything, life and breath and everything else, we have failed to love him, honour him, obey him as we should. And yet God, the Most High, is merciful. The God who is love has loved so much that he has sent his one and only Son to love his enemies by forgiving them. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son. Friends, the one who preaches this sermon that just seems so impossible is the one who practiced what he preached, because he goes to his death under the judgment of God for his enemies. And as you and I come into a relationship with this God by looking to this Jesus and trusting in him, our values will be, must be, God promises they will be changed. We will start to value the otherworldly, the radical, the impossible. We will have mercy. See, appreciating just how much of an enemy we were to God is key. Think about the emotional objections we have to that call to love our enemy. Oh, it seems so wrong. It seems so unjust. It seems dangerous. those are all our reactions from putting ourselves in the shoes of the victim, yes? The one who has been wronged against. Put yourself in the shoes of the perpetrator, the abuser, the hater, the insulter, against a holy God. Now, how are you feeling? Do you want justice or do you want mercy? Do you want what you deserve or what you don't deserve? If we were to see the depths of our sin against God, if the Holy Spirit were to actually peel back my heart that I might see to the very bottom of it, in one moment, I would be crushed. You would be too. I would not be able to stand. I would not be able to look up. If I was able to do anything, all I could do is go, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And the glory of the message of Jesus is the response comes, yes. Stand up, my child. In fact, no. Let me pick you up and put your cheek to mine. Hosea 11. I love you. I forgive you. Now come walk with me. Come be like me. Come and do the seemingly impossible. Come and love the unlovely. There is the key engine to doing this. The second thing there is we're out of time, but it's in verse 23, it's in verse 35. It's a reward that is to come that will be great. You know, one of the ways that loving our enemy can be costly is because it seems like justice will go unserved. I haven't been able to point out they're wrong against me. I haven't been able to bring justice on them or get the sympathies and the helps of others who go, oh, that was so wrong that they treated you like that. Because I'm loving them, I'm treating them like I shouldn't treat them, I'm not drawing the attention that I would otherwise. Well, Jesus assures us God sees it all and will be delighted to reward you. And here's the key part, if we're to live this out. How much do you care for God's approval? How much do you long to hear, well done, good and faithful servant? Because the more you value that opinion and that verdict to be handed down on that day and to be richly, greatly rewarded for eternity on that day, says Jesus, the more you're oriented to that, the more you will be empowered to practice the seemingly impossible. Friends, Jesus' teaching, it's radical, it's unnatural, it's from another world, and that's the point, because he brings the kingdom of God into a world that hates him and rejects him. And so to come to this Jesus, to come into his kingdom, will mean we now live radically different lives. Not so that we can impress God and he'll weigh up our lives and let us into heaven, but because his tender mercy has come to us whilst we were still enemies. We have been made his children by grace. And evidence that we know this grace, evidence that we walk in relationship with this God, is that we more and more value what he does. Not perfectly, which is why we're saved by the way of forgiveness, but sincerely wanting to. I'm going to pause right now and give you a moment to put into practice what Jesus has just called us to. The band will come up, but take a moment. Who can you in this moment pray for? And if this is the first time that you are able to pray for an enemy, can I give you this challenge? Keep that up for the next 7 days. Every day, commit to praying for them. And at the 7 days, give yourself another 7. And let's see what the Lord does in your own life, in your own heart, in terms of healing. after just 2 weeks of praying for your enemy. Let's do that, and then the band will lead us.